It's time for the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth, financial literacy educator and speaker, entrepreneur, and chairman of the board of A Bank in Formation. Take charge of your financial future with Your Personal Bank. Now here's Ference Toth.
Welcome to the Your Personal Bank Show. Well, I've been enjoying my Christmas break last couple of weeks. So to be honest with you guys, I've been out of touch on the current events, taking a break, recharging the battery, so to speak. And again, it's one of those things I just highly encourage anyone to do. If you listen to my last shows that aired, I discussed how important it was to take some time, for yourself and recharge those batteries so that you can come back, fresh, fit, ready to go, charged up, and do what needs to be done. And that's exactly what I've done. So coming back 2023 now, looking forward, excited about the year on many levels, concerned about a lot of things going forward this year in particular. And we're going to discuss some of those things today. I guess what it comes down to is it's not that I'm going to make any real hard predictions per se about 2023, but I think it's pretty clear some of the big picture items that we're going to be dealing with going forward, like inflation and the real estate market, stock market, things like that, interest rates, dividends, things like that going forward are getting more and more clear and obvious going forward. So we're going to discuss those things, all right? And I suppose the first thing I should discuss really going forward is what should we expect in 2023 going forward is some economic challenges, I believe. And a lot of people have asked me that. And what I mean by that in a couple of different ways, like I said, I'm going to expound upon, is we have, for example, we have unprecedented debt. We have the highest levels of debt in the history of our country, frankly, in history of just about any country throughout human history. And our wonderful government and our Congress have gone off over the Christmas holiday and spent another $1.7 trillion on government spending through, I believe it's September of 2023. So again, one more time, they're not listening to the American people. We had an election a couple of months ago. The Republicans did win the House, okay? Did not gain the Senate, but they did win the House. And that, by definition, means we'll have a divided government, which means the government will do less and less spending will happen and things like that. But they just couldn't help themselves. They had one more chance to spend some more of our money. And the Democrats, of course, were all on board of that. And, of course, some of the Republicans were too, to be fair. Plenty of them, something like, 68 senators, for example, voted in favor of spending another $1.7 trillion. And to make matters worse, I suppose, in my opinion, what it boils down to is the funding includes roughly a 6% increase in spending for domestic initiatives and about a 10% increase on defense spending. Now, we have over $31 trillion of debt. That's the official numbers as we speak now. Our government, our Congress, our current Congress, saw fit that they needed to send another $45 billion to Ukraine, for example, which is actually even more than Biden had asked for, okay, they requested, because, the Republicans are starting to make noise that they're not just going to write a blank check for Ukraine in the future. So they wanted to spend the extra money now. They don't want to listen to us. They don't want to be fiscally responsible in any shape, manner, or form. They just want to spend money, gain power, benefit, all that kind of things. In fact, in this $1.7 trillion spending package, there was more than 7,200 pet projects that individual lawmakers were able to add on to the bill. Often they're referred to as earmarks, and they post their requests on, it's ridiculous. I mean, earmarks were taken off because it led to too much spending for decades. That was proven. It was brought back recently by this current Congress that the Democrats controlled. And, of course, they can't help themselves. They love to spend other people's money, our money, that is. So is it frustrating? Absolutely. Is it surprising? No, not at all. Will it enhance or extend inflation? Most certainly. In other words, that's one of the things we're looking forward to in 2023 and beyond is extended, longer than necessary, higher than average inflation that we're going to be dealing with for a longer period of time until our government can see fit to finally, once and for all, gain some fiscal responsibility and just stop spending too much money. There is no way any reasonable person could at this point, with this level of debt and the amount of spending that has occurred over the previous couple of years due to COVID and all these other excuses that were given, there is no reason under the sun that I can think of that would justify spending 6% more in domestic spending this year than last and 10% more in military spending this year than last. I don't see it. There is no logical reason, excuse, whatever you want to call it, for spending the kind of money that's being spent, but not only spending it, but increasing it. That's what's so infuriating. It's just they spend records amounts of money and they get away with it. Can't help themselves, and they have to spend even more. And it just is this constant cycle. And like I said, ultimately, what's going to finally cause this to come to a screeching halt, and it will. It's here's the thing, folks. This excess spending that just continues and has done so for the last several decades, and is primarily funded by, let's face it, all the Democrats and enough of the Republicans, the uniparty, as some people call it, the ones that are not conservative, or rhinos, many people refer them to. This group, which makes up a majority, just keep spending us into oblivion. And again, one of two things are going to happen. I'm not saying it's going to happen in 2023. We're certainly feeling some of those effects with inflation, high inflation, which again, sadly, is going to continue far longer than it needs to, but they keep spending, so it's just going to exacerbate the problem and extend the problem and make it worse and last longer, which will hurt the average American, the middle class, and the poor in particular. But they're doing it because they want more control, and they want more power, and they just can't help themselves. They can't stop themselves. And the only thing that's going to do it is economic austerity measures where it's going to be forced upon them. It's going to be forced upon us just from economic circumstance, or the American people finally wake up and get rid of those that spend more money than we have spending our money. Contact me with more information on how to navigate 2023 and going forward, this high inflation environment we're going to talk about further in the upcoming at yourpersonalbank.com. Or call me at toll-free 866-268-4422. You see, this higher inflation is going to affect a lot of things in a lot of ways that we have not seen for the past decade plus. Actually, we have seen low inflation since the Great Recession of 08-09. And, of course, as many of you know, the reason behind that was the Federal Reserve dropping interest rates to at or near all-time lows, easy monetary policy, cheap borrowing of money, which causes, it's good for business. It causes asset values to rise. It's why we've seen real estate and stock prices, for example, go to all-time highs, largely because of easy monetary policy and cheap borrowing rates. Well, that's behind us. That's gone. And the causes, of course, the Federal Reserve has raised interest rates to try to combat inflation, which is at or near 40-year highs and continues to be so. The cause of that, of course, quite simply, is federal government spending far too much money in the system, chasing too few goods and services, all right, and higher than average energy prices. They've curtailed somewhat, thankfully, for most people, although I haven't seen much in the way of dropping in the price of diesel. That seems to still be quite high. Gas prices have dropped some, and mostly it's not because of our government, really. It's because of reduction of demand, primarily from places like China that have gone into shutdown modes again because of their zero COVID policy. Again, folks, it's not complicated. It's economics 101. It's supply and demand. Reduce demand, and your prices are going to go down. It's just that simple, okay? You reduce supply and your prices are going to go up, okay? It's not complicated. So the bigger influence, I think, going on right now with inflation that continues to remain stubbornly high is the federal government spending far too much money. And there's an article that just came out very recently that I find quite interesting. This was actually done by the Wharton Business School, so highly credible. And according to, you use data from the Office of Budget or Management and Budget, and their statement basically was, using accepted accounting principles, the federal government's budget is in such disarray that balancing the books would require either a 30% spending cut, now it's across the board, everything, folks, or a 40% increase in taxes. Now, folks, if this analysis by the Wharton Business School projecting future tax revenues and everything else, they forecasted this fiscal imbalance would equal 7% of the present value of all future gross domestic product for the next 75 years. Now, you don't need to know a lot about economics to know that is bad news. And since I'm running up across a hard break, I'm going to explain this further and what would, try to make more sense of this, a common sense, if you will. And if you want to navigate all of this, contact me at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. Back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. And if you were listening in the last segment, you heard me starting to discuss what are some of the things that we could expect going forward into 2023 and beyond. And I'm hesitant to make specific predictions because predictions tend to inherently be wrong, okay? But I think there's some very clear directions that things are happening, particularly from an economic standpoint, that if we, ignore at your peril, if you know what I'm trying to say. And the one that I've started discussing initially, of course, is inflation, government spending. The government, again, if you didn't hear, over the holiday break, decided to spend another $1.7 trillion to keep the government going through September of 2023, even though there was a midterm in the House. The Republicans are going to be taking over the House shortly. Again, Washington doesn't want to listen to Americans. They just want to do what they want to do and spend our money recklessly, in my opinion. But the thing about this spending bill that's so galling, in my opinion, is the fact that it's an increase of about 6% for domestic spending and about 10% increase on defense spending over last year's spending. In other words, we're in a position where the previous couple of years or so, all-time high COVID spending and $31 trillion in debt. The financial house is unstable at best, yet and we have a midterm election where the American voter spoke and decided they wanted a divided government, which means less is accomplished for the government. They chose to not listen. They didn't want to listen to the voter. They wanted just to spend the money that as much money as they could from now through September of next year. So we're going to be stuck with a spending bill that was passed in 2022 through most of 23, even though the American voter voted otherwise. Again, just another case of representatives not listening to their constituents, us, and just spending other people's money, not theirs, ours, to get whatever benefit they could get out of it. In fact, as I stated earlier, there was over 7,200 earmarks, personal earmarks, in this particular bill, projects that lawmakers sought for their home states or districts or whatever. And, we don't need this kind of spending when we have the kind of debt that we have and the financial house, that's in disarray, according to the Wharton Business School, where they're stating to balance the books, the government would have to spend 30% less on across the board, everything. I mean, folks, that's defense spending. That's Social Security. That's Medicare. That's everything. That's what it would take to balance the books. Okay? Or increase taxes by 40% across the board on everything. That's how messed up the federal budget is, the federal spending is right now. And I guess what I'm trying to say is put that in a personal perspective. What if you were looking at your own personal financial situation for you or your business, let's say, and you came to realize that the only way you could manage the expenses that you had, you would have to increase your income by 40%, because increase in taxes for government is income, right? You'd have to increase 40% just to break even. Or you'd have to take a 30% spending cut. You have to spend 30% less on literally everything. Your mortgage, your car, everything, your food, everything. Now, I would venture to guess, most people listening to me right now would find that situation quite daunting. It would be a major lifestyle change, to be an understatement, right? It'd be a very significant change in your life to accomplish be able to increase your income by 40% or reduce your spending by 30%. Those are big, big differences, all right? That's where our government is at right now. And until they come to face that situation head on with some maturity. Let's face it, some fiscal maturity, some fiscal responsibility for real. This problem will continue and will continue to exacerbate and get worse and worse and accelerate in its worseness. I know that's not a word, but I'm trying to make a point here. It will continually accelerate the problem. In other words, this problem's not going away. We're not going to close our eyes, put our head in the sand, and assume it's just going to go away, because it's not. It's only going to progressively get worse. And the drag that this article talking about from Wharton Business School is saying it's going to be a drag of like 7% of our future or present value of our future gross domestic product. In other words, that's like taking 7% of your total income and applying that to debt payments right now. Just take 7% off the top. Again, that drags you down. It's like carrying an anchor or a weight. It slows things down. It will have a significant impact on things going forward. Now, if you're one of those that say, "Hey, I'm fine. What do I care?" Well, what I'm going to say to you is you're part of the problem, because it will literally affect everyone, whether you're receiving money from the government, whether you're paying taxes or not. It doesn't matter, because it will impact inflation, if nothing else. We're going to have higher than average inflation because of this higher debt and spending that our government is continuing to do. it will affect you directly also. Not to mention the next generation, the kids or grandkids, let's say. I mean, is there any concern on your part for those people? Those are the things that we have to address as adults, as mature, fiscally mature and fiscally responsible adults. Those are the things we have to address, okay? There's just no two ways about it. Some difficult decisions will have to be made. Some tough actions will have to be made. And guess what, folks? We're going to have to grow up and be adults about it and deal with it and do it. And until we get to that point, again, it's not going to get better. If we don't step up and be mature adults that we should be fiscally responsible adults and human beings like we should be, folks, this will get forced on us. There will be austerity measures that we'll have to deal with, much like Greece had to do a decade or so ago, for example, and other countries previously. We're going to deal with it, or it's going to deal with us. That's what I want to help understand. These are the things we need to look forward to, not, and it's really not looking forward to. We need to address and appreciate and recognize going forward as we think about our future, our financial future, how we invest, what we're going to do, what's going to do well, what's not going to do well. And so what I'm trying to say is, and I'll deal with this more in the next segment, is things have changed. Our economic situation has changed dramatically, and we need to change with it. If you want to learn how to do that more so, contact me at yourpersonalbank.com or toll-free 866-268-4422.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. Back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth.
Welcome back to Your Personal Bank Show. And in the last segment, I was discussing how, well, we really need to gain some fiscal responsibility in our leaders. We need to demand that of our representatives. That's what it boils down to. They are the current crop of leaders that we have are not really leaders. They're just many of them are going to do just what's in their own best interest. I've said that so many times. Sadly, it's rampant, and it's in both parties. Majority of the people that are elected in elected office are not looking out for the best interests of the country or their constituents. They're looking out for their own best interests, which is what? Get elected and get reelected, okay? That's what it boils down to. But this point about gaining some fiscal maturity, fiscal responsibility, and needing that on a national level, not just personally, is an education thing that needs to be addressed. And as I stated earlier, whether you're paying into the system through taxes or taking from the system by getting paid benefits, and that's what you're doing, you're taking from other people, you need to understand it's going to cost you more either way through higher inflation if the government's spending more money. And the problem is these are some of the things that need to change. And we as taxpayers, we as citizens, we as constituents, voters, and all those things need to demand of our representatives these changes, or nothing's going to change in the future. And what are those changes? Well, for one, you can't have a situation what we have right now in a number of states around the country where welfare benefits, for example, exceed the average medium household income. Currently, the average household income in the United States is roughly $70,000. That's the average. There are something like about 20 states in this country right now, approximately, that a family of four, husband and wife, 2 kids, can earn more in unemployment benefits, Obamacare subsidies, and et cetera, and outpace or earn more than the average medium income without working. See, a lot of these economists have been scratching their head trying to figure out with inflation high, why is unemployment low? Folks, it's not that complicated. If you pay a bunch of people to stay home and not work, in fact, in 14 states, Right now, according to a number of studies, 14 states give you an annualized equivalent of $80,000 a year in wages and benefits, because much of those benefits are tax-free. If you're earning an income, of course, it's taxable, so you got to earn more, right? I already said the average median household income is about $70,000. If in 14 states you're earning more than that not working than working, a lot of people are going to make the decision not to work. And for us to expect that those people are going to just stop taking from the system is unrealistic. Sure, a few will. A few will see the light and say, hey, it isn't right to take from the system, take from other people, and take advantage of the system that's there. But the reality is the vast majority will not do that. They don't have that sense of enough, I'm trying to think of the right word, but sense of honor, accomplishment, whatever it may be, whatever you want to call it. But the bottom line is most won't. So what do we have to do? We have to change the system. Welfare benefits, paying people not to work. They're receiving far too much money in far too many states, which is also exacerbating our debt problem, exacerbating our spending problem, our government spending. It's exacerbating inflation, which affects everybody, even those that are receiving money from the government, okay? And it's part of the reason why this last spending bill, the federal government decided to spend something like 6% more on domestic spending than previous year, because they're paying people not to work, folks. We have to demand change. We have to not elect representatives that go for this stuff or encourage it or vote for it. We need to let them know, and then they need to be, if they don't listen, they need to be voted out. I can tell you one thing politicians listen to. They want, again, I've said it so many times, Thomas Sowell said it best. There's 3 priorities most politicians have. 1 is to get elected. 2 is to get reelected. And the 3rd priority, all other priorities fall far below the first 2. If they think their job's in jeopardy, they will vote accordingly. That's what needs to happen and change. And how's that going to change? We need to educate voters. We need to help people understand these things so they will change who they vote for. I'm going to finish up on some thoughts, but if you want to contact me on how to navigate all this and really not do more than survive but thrive, call me 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. Back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. And as I started this show at the beginning, I said I was going to discuss or share some thoughts I had about what to expect, what should we do for 2023 looking forward and beyond. And without making any direct predictions per se, because those are often wrong, is to just share some key ideas and things that are very likely to happen and how we can act and react accordingly. I mean, this recent poll shows that something like 70% of economists predict that in 2023 we will see a recession. We had one in 2022, the first half of it. It was relatively mild, speaking per se. They're predicting something more significant. I believe, and it just increasingly becoming clear, as I've discussed on this show, that inflation is going to persist higher than average, higher than many people think, for perhaps far longer than most people think, and we need to address that accordingly. And why do I say that? Why do I think that? Well, again, I just look at the root cause of inflation, and the root cause, the 2 main root causes of inflation is always high energy costs, and high government spending. That's what it boils down to. and our government continues to spend like a drunken sailor. They increased the spending in their budget for the 2023 more than 2022, which was at near all-time record highs. They are not only not stopping, they're continuing to increase, which means more money will be in the system. Inflation will continue to persist. Regardless of what the Federal Reserve is going to do, they can't stop it. They can't stop inflation by themselves, especially if the government insists on continuing to spend more money. It can't be done. Now, what they can do is raise interest rates, which they've been doing, and they may have to continue to raise those further. I see a scenario that's very likely. I'm not saying this one's probable. I'm going to say it's probable, not for sure, but increasingly likely that the Fed Reserve is going to continue to raise interest rates for some time to come throughout 2023. It remains to be seen what's going to happen. A lot of people are thinking that they're going to raise it a little bit more in, say, the first quarter or so, and then taper off. I'm not so sure. They have a mandate, and here's why. They have a mandate of their goal is around 2% inflation, and we're still sitting around 7%, okay, annualized. Folks, that is extraordinarily high and extraordinarily bad, historically bad, like generationally bad, okay? And if they're set on tackling it, they're going to have to continue to raise and raise until they break its back. But if the federal government keeps spending, it's going to just exacerbate it further. I don't see any stopping that. Having the House, the Republicans holding the House will help some to a degree, but I don't have great faith in all of the Republicans sticking together and not spending money, because there's a certain group of them, rhinos, many people call them, or moderate Republicans, whatever you want, that are in no way, shape, or form fiscally conservative, who continue to spend money and vote to spend money along with the Democrats. So again, until we see more of a conservative, or I should say a fiscally responsible majority in the House or Senate or White House, we will not see a reduction in spending. And that's going to have to come from the American people. So this higher interest, what do we do? How do we handle it? Higher inflation and things like that. The bottom line is what's going on with the economy is vastly different than what was going on in the last decade with low interest, easy monetary policy, and all that. So the things that worked in the last decade probably will not work going forward in 2023 and beyond in the foreseeable future. In other words, we could see a situation where this is a decade of where interest rate sensitive assets thrive. Things like the stock market and real estate markets and such suffer, which is a total role reversal from the past decade. Those that recognize that change, that shift, and folks, this is from an economic standpoint, this is not just a subtle change we're seeing. We're seeing some of the most aggressive interest rate hikes in Federal Reserve history in terms of how aggressive and how quickly they're raising the rates. We're seeing tremendous levels of debt. We're seeing historical levels of inflation. The changes that we're seeing are not a ripple, they're a tsunami. Okay? If you recognize that, take advantage of that, and you can thrive, but you've got to change what you were doing before. So again, it's no secret. 2022 was a really rough year for the stock market. What do most people think is going to happen in 23? Everything I see and read and all that tells me that the worst is not over. Certainly doesn't look like it's going to get better anytime soon. So the stock market, with rare exceptions, is going to be a rough place to be to invest, okay? That's the way it's shaping up more and more. Real estate has already started cresting in many markets where it was high, like Phoenix, where I live, but many others. And I've seen lots of predictions of things getting quite a bit worse going forward in terms of real estate values and things like that. And obviously, if interest rates stay high, the longer they stay high, the worse it's going to get, because interest rates are probably the number one impactor for the value of real estate. Now, I'm not saying all doom and gloom here. Opportunities will present themselves when the dust settles. When that happens, I can't say. I don't know if it'll be, say, at the end of the year or the following year or the year after that or anything like that. I don't know. I don't think anyone can make a real, true, accurate prediction on that. But it increasingly looks like the things that grew wealth and grew asset values the previous decade, and from, let's say, roughly 2010 to 2021, 22, let's say, okay, the things that did well then are probably going to really struggle, and vice versa. What did not do well in the 2010 to 2020, let's say? Anything interest rate sensitive, bonds, interest rate, like CDs, bank accounts, dividends, all those kinds of things, annuities, really suffered, folks. The returns on those were historically low, and the reason was quite simple. We had the lowest interest rate environment in the history of our country, and that's a statistical fact. For some of the lowest rates we've ever seen for the longest period of times we've ever seen. So those things that were, again, think about what CD rates have been paying for the past decade. Next to nothing. Bank accounts, next to nothing. Bond rates were really low. Dividends have been on the low side, okay? One advantage dividends have is some of it has to do with profitability of the company in many ways, and interest rate sensitive. So when you have a situation where it's interest rate sensitive and profits of the company, and you're dealing with an industry that, let's just say, is recession resistant or recession proof, then you've got a winner. And there's some things that do that. I can tell you one that does, and I talk about it all the time, is the personal bank, the insurance industry. It's recession proof, basically. The investments, the returns are based on a person's longevity, for example, okay? And people don't live longer or shorter periods of time based, if the economy is good or bad, so to speak, okay? If we're in a recession or not. Generally, people keep living longer because of medical advances and such. But it's quite recession resistant at the very least. And then when you add on top of that interest rate sensitive with higher than average interest rates, because the Fed's raising them and is still at this point in time, continuing to raise them. We're seeing increasing dividends. We've got 6% dividends, insured, guaranteed, tax-free right now. And folks, those are on the rise, okay? So we're looking at a better and better scenario going forward with the personal bank. And that's why, personally, no pun intended, I'm excited about the future, truly am, for myself and my clients, because we just went through the worst decade in terms of returns in the history of this country. And for dividend paying assets and your personal bank and dividend, we went through the lowest period ever. And it was successful, and it worked, and it was profitable. Now we're going into an environment where interest rates are continuing to climb. Therefore, dividends, which are interest rate sensitive, at least these are, will continue to climb. So, folks, guess what? It's just going to get better and better. And I can tell you this from just discussing this with many of my clients. They were happy with what was going on before because of the guarantees, because of the tax-free, the consistency, decent returns. But now they're looking at increasing returns on top of all that with the guarantees, the safety, and the tax-free. So when you put all that together, this is truly a bright spot in the economic world, if you will, investing world, whatever you want to call it. And I couldn't be more excited. Okay, and that's in my 23-year career so far. It's the best time that I have seen personally, and I can say this with 100% accuracy, that it's the best time I've seen in my career to be involved with investing in dividend-paying, high cash value, dividend-paying insurance policies that, with increasing dividends, okay? I mean, because of the environment we're in, the increasing interest rate environment we're in, and the safety and such and that's involved. Because I'll leave it at this with one of my last thoughts. 2023, I mean, there's no question, 2020 was a rough year with COVID and all that happened. Then the stuff we were dealing with in 21, and then 22 with the midterms and the politics of what was going on and all the changes that were just coming at it as rapid fire fashion to our way of life and our economy and all those kinds of things. Sad to say, I don't see much changing for 23. Maybe a little bit less because of the Republicans taking the House. Maybe some of the worst excesses might curtail to a degree. But a lot of those things, Biden still is in the White House. And there's a lot of things the executive branch can still do. That's just the sad fact. And we've got a lot of chaos, economic uncertainty ahead of us. We just got to get through this next year or two, is my opinion. I do believe things are going to get better, quite a bit better, 2-3 years from now, if we can get our government and leaders to change direction to some degree at least. I do see a better future going forward, but we got to get through what we're dealing with right now first. If you're interested in learning how to navigate all of this, thrive in this high inflation, interest rate environment, economic uncertainty, slow growth, higher, with higher debt, all these things that we're dealing with going forward, call me 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. Again, that's 866-268-4422. And it's still on our money, so I will say, in God we trust.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. This show is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information. The presenter and guest on this program do not engage in legal, accounting, or tax advice. Professional advice regarding your situation should be sought if required. Products and riders may have limitations and may not be available in all states. Excessive unpaid loans may affect performance. Distributions may become taxable if not managed properly. Replacements may not be suitable for everyone. There may be charges when replacing coverage. Compare when considering a replacement. Dividend rates and baseline of credit rates may change. Contact yourpersonalbank.com for current rates.